Bonsoir, good afternoon. We are, I think, very privileged to have with us Eva Bartlett, who is a courageous and independent journalist who is bringing us a message from the people of Syria. Media disinformation is complicit in this war. This is an illegal and criminal undertaking, and the media is complicit. At least the US media is complicit in that it is portraying this war as a humanitarian undertaking whereby the Western military alliance and the so-called international community are waging a war on terrorism, a counter-terrorist initiative. Now, I'd like, in the course of a few minutes, to disclaim this basic proposition. Our main speaker is Eva Bartlett. I will try to be as brief as possible, but there are a number of fundamental questions which have to be addressed. And I'll start with Dara. Now, those who are, actually I was in Syria, I left Syria on March 1st, 2011, after a 2-month stay. But those who are familiar with Dara will know that Dara is to Syria what Plattsburgh, New York, is the United States. You don't organize a national movement against the government in Plattsburgh, New York. You organize it in Washington, D.C. or in Chicago or New York. What happened in Dara is very important because it dispels the understanding that this was a protest movement. It wasn't a protest movement. Why? And this is based on press reports from Israeli, Lebanese, and other sources to the effect that police casualties were higher than those of so-called demonstrators, and that there was an exchange of gunfire and acts of terrorism committed on March 17, 18, 2011. Those, I think, have to go on record, because a lot of people misunderstand, and they said, well, it was a protest movement and then it evolved towards armed conflict. No, it was an insurgency from abroad from day one, and the reports prove it. The second element is that the recruitment and training of the terrorists started right from the beginning. Or in fact before, okay? Before. The outset was in March 2011, they already their training program and so on. And there were various training and recruitment programs. I think now we have a lot more evidence than we did at the outset. Of course, Saudi Arabia was involved, Qatar was involved, Turkey was involved. In 2014, in the month of June, ISIS is created and then moves across the desert from Syria to Iraq in Toyota pickup trucks. I think most of us are familiar with this historic image. But I think we have to understand and analyze that image. Why? Anybody who has a minimal understanding of military affairs will know that a convoy of this nature without air defense can be liquidated virtually in less than an hour, okay, with advanced weapon systems. What are the targets of this military counterterrorism operation? There's absolutely no evidence that the operation was directed against the Islamic State. In fact, the Islamic State would most probably have been liquidated had they followed their mandate. I'm giving you some details as to the number. We're not talking about small-scale operation. We're talking about more than 100 sorties over a 2-year period. Okay? Over 100 sorties over a 2-year period. In fact, it's 111,000 sorties, okay, over a 2-year period. Most of which were reconnaissance and supplying the terrorists with arms and supplies, etc. More than 8,300 strike sorties directed against Syria. The media doesn't necessarily consider this as a crime against humanity. They call it collateral damage. They don't address it. They don't even give the figures. And I'm giving you the figures here. Here are the figures. Voici les données. 31,900 schools, hospitals, residential areas, 40 countries involved. And then the question we have to ask ourselves, who is the coalition of complicit countries? That's what I call Obama's counter-terrorism campaign. It's the airstrikes. And in other words, they're using the pretext of the global war on terrorism to destroy a country. There is no moderate opposition in Syria. There never was any moderate opposition. There is an opposition within the country which is involved in civil society, but there's no opposition in the field of actual militia and so on. Right? 31,900 targets damaged or destroyed by US and coalition air raids. The cost of this operation, $9.3 billion, something of the order of $12.3 million a day at the expense of US taxpayers, and killing. And of course, nobody was killed at all in these bombardments. Okay? About 140 strike sorties a day. Of course, this did destroy and disrupt the country. It did trigger a refugee crisis. We have to acknowledge that. And we also have to acknowledge that the United States, and this is something which the media has not really discussed, is that the United States has delivered weapons to the terrorists through various means. This is only one example of using the secondary weapons market to deliver weapons to the terrorists. And it's based on Jane's Defense Weekly, which is a very authoritative military source. And it says that in the course of 1 month, au courant d'un mois, plus de 990 tonnes d'armement ont été livrées aux rebelles en Syrie. Our government in Ottawa has allowed for the export of weapons to Saudi Arabia, knowing that Saudi Arabia is a state sponsor of both Islamic State as well as the various Al-Qaeda affiliated entities operating inside Syria. And the last element has to do, and I won't get into details, it has to do with the liberation of Aleppo, which has been occupied for 4 years by terrorists, Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists, known and documented, and the media has come to the rescue. Well, both the international community as well as the media have come to the rescue of these terrorists who are in effect considered as the victims of the liberation movement of Aleppo. And again, it's perhaps the biggest lie is that in all the reports that we read, they don't mention, they don't identify the names of these occupation forces, which are the various jihadist, so-called jihadist entities which are affiliated to Al-Qaeda, and which are, in fact, primarily responsible for the various acts of atrocity occurring in this conflict. Thank you very much.